Have you ever had a really bad family vacation? Well, if they made a horror movie about it, that would be Speak No Evil. It premiered at Sundance in January 2022, and it's really, really Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watch or Pass. I'm going to talk to you about Speak No Evil, a new horror film that is premiering on the midnight stage at Sundance on January 22nd, 2022. It is a Danish film about a family vacation that starts off subtly and then goes horribly wrong. Oh, and my hot take is it's a really, really good film. I love how subtle it is. It is a horror movie, but everything is very, very nuanced. Like some of the situations that arise could be seen in a horror light, but could also be seen in like a cultural light or a, not being rude light. And so everything in this buildup is so subtle and so gradual and so wonderfully sinister. And then eventually towards the end, it goes a little more on the horror end, but the journey there is fantastic. And I did love the actors and the story and just how kind of fresh and real it felt. So my recommendation is to watch it. It's definitely really good. It's only in festivals right now. So if you can see it in the festival, that'd be great. If not, I'm sure it'll come to digital and then I don't know, probably Shudder. I mean, this is the perfect movie for Shudder. So I imagine it'll end up there. But until then, definitely seek it out. And I'm going to talk to you a little about the film, a few things I liked. One thing I was neutral on, and I'm going to go into the ending just a little bit because I thought the ending was really interesting. As you can imagine, there will be spoilers. I will try to keep the spoilers to the ending so that you can hear my thoughts before, and then I'll have a nice clean break for spoilers. But when that point happens, turn this off if you don't want to know, because the ending is pretty shocking and I really liked it. So make sure to go in blind. All right, so in Speak No Evil, you have a family that is vacationing in Tuscany, and while they're there, they meet this charming, fun couple that they spend some time with, have some dinners, kind of your normal like vacation friendship story. And oftentimes, what happens with those is you go back to your home, your homes, you go back to your lives, and that is just a fun memory. Maybe you're Facebook friends with them, and that's about it. But in this case, that Dutch couple wrote them a letter inviting them out to visit. And they're like, hey, we had so much fun on vacation. We should all go back and see them in Holland. They make the trip. And then when they get there, things are very different. Things are very subtly different and a little overtly different at times. And what they kind of thought this couple was is very different from what this couple actually ended up being. So things I liked about this movie. The first is the story. Like I said, it was such a simple but wonderfully sinister story. Like you have this couple, they're taking this trip to Holland and they're thinking they're going to have this fun weekend with this family that they really got along with well. But then there's all these little kind of touches that could, put you on edge, but also feel very relatable. Like you go to someone's house and they forget something, or they do something a little odd, and you can totally think of it as like, oh, they're just being quirky, or oh, this is just like cultural differences because we are Danish and they're Dutch. Maybe the culture is just a little bit different. But also viewed through a horror vein, you can see, oh, this is starting to become a little bit more sinister, a little more unsettling. Some weird stuff is happening. I love that. I love that the story felt very kind of relatable. Like you can totally relate to these characters not wanting to be rude or kind of writing off things that were a little weird because you don't want to make a scene. And I love that. I love that about this. And that leads right into the second thing I love, which was the subtle touches. Like the horror elements in this were not overt like in a lot of other horror movies. If you change a few things about this movie, if you change maybe the music, some of the reactions and the ending, definitely, this could be just like a romantic comedy or like a quirky drama. Like the horror elements in this were very subtle and are kind of very nuanced. Like a lot of this stuff that happens can be written off as like, oh, well, maybe they forgot, or oh, like that was on vacation. They said something a little different on vacation, but maybe that was like a white lie. Like things like that are throughout this story. And then, some of the interactions between the kids could be a little odd, but then also could just be like, oh, well, he's a quirky kid. And they explain that he has difficulty talking and he gets nervous. So that's just a little strange, but it is what it is. I love that. I loved how subtle the horror was in this. There was a very, very long simmering buildup. And then there's a couple like big instances that, they're not actually your like traditional horror. They're more of just like, this is an unsettling, uncomfortable thing and they should get out. But through that, like none of this felt like your typical horror type movie. Everything was a little more nuanced, maybe a little bit more kind of downplayed for us to make this, to contribute to. But first thing I love, the story that felt very realistic and relatable. The third thing I really loved are the characters, and all this kind of goes hand in hand because the characters, again, they feel like relatable people, and especially the Dutch couple that kind of have all these strange faux pas that could just be, being rude, or could be them being a little more sinister. Like, they are perfect. Like, I loved both of them. They are so good at, like, saying things with confidence, of like, oh, I didn't say that, when, like, they did, or like, oh, like that I just said, something silly on vacation. Like, especially Patrick, played by Fedja van Huêt, was so amazing. Like, it was really wonderful and terrifying to see, because he was so charming when he needed to be, and so kind of relatable and standoffish when he needed to be. But then when something a little bit more sinister happened, it he could turn on and become cold very quickly. And he was really, really interesting to see. And overall, just all the characters in this film, they were so well acted, and they were so well written, that I loved spending time with them. Like, it felt like I said, it felt like a very realistic type story. And the characters, even though some fairly crazy things happen, like, nothing felt supernatural, nothing felt like overt. It all felt like something that was grounded in reality, like a very twisted version of reality, but reality nonetheless. And the last thing I really loved in this film is the music and the sound, because it does a really good job of putting you on edge. There's some really great scenes where the sound will just kind of cut off, and your speakers, and the scene is filled with this, like, blaring classical music that really does a good job of kind of like masking some of the horror, but also making you feel uneasy, because it's like you can't know what's going on, but you expect something to be bad because it's a horror movie and they're playing classical music and something is happening, and it really makes you worried. It kind of puts you on edge. It gives you some tension. And I love that about this film. Like, again, that kind of fits in with the subtlety that this film had. So overall, like, things I liked: the story, the subtle touches, the characters, the music, like, everything is very well put together in this movie. It is a grounded horror experience. It is an interesting horror experience. It's one that kept my attention throughout, and I love just how different it also felt, because it didn't have, I don't know, horror tropes is the wrong word, but it felt like something that was wholly different than some of the other horror movies I've seen. Now, things I was a little bit more neutral on, and this could be a criticism, but I actually didn't really mind it that much. There was really no explanation for the overall conclusion, like why the conclusion happened. There was no explanation, and I was a little bit kind of turned off. But then the thought more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? That actually is fine, because you don't need to have an explanation. You don't need to have an explanation for why things happen. You can kind of glean some of the hints throughout the story of why these things happen. And I'm going to go into a little bit about that in the ending, where there will be spoilers. But when I thought more about it, I was like, you know what? I kind of like that there was no explanation. So that's why I put it in the more neutral side of things. Because a lot of times you'll have a horror movie where they'll try to explain everything, or even not even a horror movie. A lot of movies they'll try to wrap everything up in a bow and explain the entire story to you, so the audience can leave feeling like they understood everything. And sometimes that can be a little bit disappointing, because the explanation is generally not as good as the buildup. And in this film, you don't have that problem. You have a really fantastic buildup, a really slow, subtle buildup, and then a big ending that feels natural given everything that you've seen, but also doesn't leave you disappointed, because it doesn't try to explain away everything. So, going to the ending, and like I said, there will be spoilers if you don't want to know anything about this film, and it'll be tough to know much about this film because it's only playing at Sundance right now. Turn this off. You probably want to be surprised, because it is a very shocking ending. So, but if you have seen it already, maybe you saw it at Sundance, maybe you are just curious, you want to know what happened, let's keep going. But like I said, there will be spoilers, massive spoilers here. So when the Danish couple, Bjorn and Louise, and their daughter Agnes, go to visit the Dutch couple, Patrick and Karen, and their son Abel, they think it's going to be this wonderful trip. All they know is that Patrick was a doctor. They were both very charming. The kids seem to get along. Abel was a little quiet because he gets nervous, and he has a condition where his tongue is a little bit smaller. But they think, hey, this is going to be a wonderful trip. This is going to be a great vacation. And then when they get there, the first thing you see is their house is a cabin in the wood. It doesn't look like what you were expecting the house of a doctor to look like. It looks like, it's not a bad house, but it is a very different type of house, a little bit more of an unsettling house. And so when they pull up, that's your first kind of subtle hint of what's gonna happen. But I don't think anyone says anything. And then when they go inside, Louise had mentioned earlier that she's a vegetarian, and Patrick had commented on how great that was, how great for the environment was, how thoughtful it was. And then as soon as they get there, they find out that Patrick has been preparing a boar all day long, and he's like, "Oh, I've been making this all day. It's so tender and juicy. You should try this." And he essentially gently but forcefully kind of like makes Louise have some of that boar. And even though like he should have known that she's a vegetarian, they mentioned it earlier, and she eats it to kind of not be rude. But again, this is one of those like very subtle things that was like, if you like, no one mentioned it, I think, until later about what happened. But like in the scene, there's no mention of like she's a vegetarian and how like awkward this is and how kind of like rude this is. It's just like, oh, like I'm going to try. Oh, it's very good. I love that kind of like, I loved how subtle it was and how kind of grounded it was and how relatable it was, right? Like I could totally see like, oh, I forgot that this person's a vegetarian and I made this food and like I'm trying to get them to eat it because I'm so excited about how much I made, not realizing how rude that was. Like that is a very relatable situation. But again, I should have probably known. Patrick should have known. It's those subtle touches that kind of make this film such a great experience. So eventually, these subtle touches build up, and it kind of comes to a head after the family, the parents go out to a bar, and there's this very awkward like bar dinner. And then the drive home, Patrick just blaring music and not listening, and he's drunk and he's kind of driving a little sporadically. So that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And then like that night, they find their daughter Agnes sleeping in their bed, which is, she likes to go into the parents' beds. Their parents' room was locked. She was knocking and they like ignored it. And so it would make sense that maybe she's like going to go sleep in the other adult's bed because she needs someone nearby. But it was a very awkward situation. And so those two combined kind of broke the camel's back, and the Danish family just packs up and leaves. Good decision. It was very bad. It was a very bad situation. Good decision. Leave. Good. They're driving, and Agnes starts complaining that she left her bunny. She has this cherished childhood bunny that she's always losing, and she starts complaining like, I can't find the bunny. I can't find the bunny. And they turn around, and this, I think in my notes I wrote like, why? Like they should just kept going, but they turn around because they want that bunny and they think they can just sneak in and sneak out. And they get there, and of course, Agnes finds the bunny under her car seat, but they're already there, and they get confronted by the Dutch couple, and they kind of have a heart to heart. I love this scene because I thought that this is where like the horror is really going to start. Like they're going to do something, they're going to kidnap them, something bad's going to happen. But no, they have like a heart to heart. Like, well, we didn't realize that this was rude, and kind of this very relatable, like understandable explanations. And so they decide to stay. They say, hey, you know what, we'll stay. We'll try to have the rest of this weekend. We'll be fine. You're already here. Like, let's start over. But again, during this time, like everywhere in this film, there are these very subtle like touches that show kind of how unsettling this situation is. And eventually it kind of comes to a head when Patrick is disciplining his son, Abel, but he does it in like a very strict authoritarian way that does feel like very awkward. Like this person has something else going on. This is not a good situation. And so they finally decide to leave. Like they finally leave for real. But unfortunately, they waited too long. And so as they're driving, there's a car that's following them, and they start to get concerned. And so they're trying to evade the car. They eventually get their car stuck. So they get the car stuck, and Bjorn goes out to look for help because the car is stuck. He doesn't want everyone to go out in the night. He goes out to look for help, and he doesn't find it. When he gets back, the car is empty. So his wife, Louise, and his daughter, Agnes, are missing. And so he's looking around, and a car pulls up, and out steps Patrick. And Bjorn is like in shock. He's scared. He looks terrible because he's had a night. And so he like pleads with Patrick. It's like, don't do this to me. Like, don't hurt my family. I just want to go home. And Patrick says, just do what we say and everything will be fine. And so they get in the car, and now you see Patrick driving. Bjorn is up front. Louise and Agnes are in the back along with Karen. And so they're all driving, and it's very quiet. They pull up to, I think, their house, and you see the babysitter there, the babysitter that everyone had used. He's there. And then it gets crazy. Like, this is when it gets very crazy. So Patrick, beats up Bjorn, like hits him, and Louise and Karen holds down Agnes, and the babysitter kind of like holds Luis down as Karen, and this is a very difficult scene, but also kind of very fitting. Karen cuts Agnes's tongue, and then they pull Agnes out of the car. The babysitter gets Agnes, like essentially kidnapping her, and it's a very difficult scene because she's got like blood coming from her face, but it's also a very like this is a horror element. This is the horror aspect of this movie. And he pulls Agnes away, door closes, and Patrick keeps driving. And as you would imagine, Luis and Bjorn are upset. They're dejected. They don't know what's happening. But they, and at this point, I think they're kind of broken. So they just are kind of listening to whatever is happening. And they have tried to fight back, but they weren't able to overpower. So at this point, Patrick is driving. You don't know where, into the night. They arrive at like a rock quarry. Patrick makes them get out of the car. And when they're doing this, Bjorn asks, "Why are you doing this?" And Patrick says, "Because you let me," which I think is right. Like, I think that is the explanation. There's no like overall explanation. I mean, I think there's a few things, and I'll go into that right after the ending. But the overall explanation is because he could, because he can, and this is something that he either enjoys doing or has a need to do. But in any event, now that they're out of the car, Patrick tells them to strip. So they strip, and then they have to go down into the quarry. And you don't really know what's happening. They're very scared. It's very quiet. I kind of expected like a gunshot or something. And while they're down in the quarry, they're kind of looking at each other. Bjorn and Luis are, and boom, Luis gets hit with like a stone. And you're like, what? Like what? And then another stone hits her, and she collapses. And then a stone hits Bjorn, and you see the camera kind of pans out, and you see Patrick and Karen throwing rocks, like heavy rocks from up on a ledge at Patrick, or at Bjorn and Luis. And that's how this movie ends. And this is an example of when the sound kind of cuts out, so you don't hear this. The sound cuts out. You have this beautiful, horrible music playing during this scene as you watch kind of like Patrick and Karen throw rocks at the slowly becoming motionless bodies of Bjorn and Luis. And then that's kind of the ending. So it flashes forward to like another similar Tuscany vacation scene. You see someone swimming, you see happy people, it's bright and sunny, and you see a family kind of out of focus, but you can still see eating, and you get like there's like a man, a woman, and a little boy, and it looks like they're very happy. It's kind of a lovely vacation. And then the camera cuts to a road, and you see a car slowly driving up. And when you see inside the car, you see that Patrick is driving, Karen is there, and in the back seat you see Agnes. So and then that's the end of the movie. That's the thing. So I think the things you can draw from that is they are probably kind of doing this over and over. I don't know if maybe they kidnap a kid until they start to rebel, because that's what was happening with Abel. Abel was kind of starting to rebel. It seems like he was starting to like not listen to them. He was trying to kind of communicate with this new couple when they were there, and so maybe they find a new kid, I guess, to kind of continue on this journey, or to kind of like redo this. But maybe also this is their MO. Like they like the sense of control. The whole movie felt like they were trying to exert their control on Bjorn and Luis. Like they would do things to kind of push them out of their comfort zone, or kind of encourage them to listen to them even though they didn't want to. And so maybe this whole thing is just kind of like a control thing. They like to get a couple to their house, kind of see how far they can push, and then when they can't push anymore, then they get rid of them, take the kid. Maybe it's some combination of two, and just kind of continue this cycle. But the film doesn't really ever tell you that, which I liked, actually. I mean, I put it as neutral, but I think I kind of do like that you don't explain. But that is Speak No Evil. It's a very good film. It's a very interesting one. I love that it doesn't feel like kind of your traditional horror movie, but it does have a lot of really great nuanced horror elements, and it has this really fantastic build-up and a shocking ending that kind of naturally follows from that build-up. So thanks. Definitely check it out. See it on the festival circuit. See it when it comes digital. It's a really good movie. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. And check out my other content, please. I've got other movie reviews, interviews, including an interview with Christian Tafdrup, the co-writer and director of this film. I've got unboxing videos and movie recommendations. Thank you.